Welcome to Episode 17, E1 Scope, What's In, What's Out, where we translate essential assurance into clear boundaries that teams can plan against. Scope is the most powerful lever you control because it decides what must be proven now and what can wait. When E1 is scoped well, effort concentrates on the few categories that reduce the most risk and answer the most common buyer questions. When scope is vague, evidence sprawls, timelines slip, and reviews wander into topics that belong to deeper programs. Think of E1 as a compact kit focused on hygiene, identity, endpoints, patching, logging, backups, and a small set of governance basics. We will name what E1 includes, what it usually excludes, and how to confirm you are aligned to current guidance. By the end, you will have a practical mental checklist that prevents rework and preserves momentum.
A scope is defined by three anchors: the organizational boundary, the in-scope systems that handle sensitive data, and the essential controls that must operate there. The organizational boundary names the legal entity or entities participating, so reviewers know whose processes and records apply. The systems list identifies applications, databases, platforms, and supporting services that process, store, or transmit sensitive information. The essential controls are the hygiene set the program expects to see, nothing exotic but real and repeatable. Clear scope is written, versioned, and approved before evidence collection begins. It includes inclusions and exclusions with short rationales so a reader can follow your decisions. When these anchors are documented, every later step, sampling, testing, and reporting becomes simpler and faster.
Core hygiene categories included in E1 target the most common failure points. Expect to demonstrate baseline asset and software inventories, vulnerability handling with a sensible cadence, access governance, endpoint configuration, logging from priority sources, and recovery capability. These categories are chosen because they prevent or limit the incidents that vendors and customers see most often. They also create the foundation for deeper assurance later by establishing owners, procedures, and a rhythm of evidence. The point is not to check every possible safeguard, but to show that your program handles the basics without drama. If a control does not materially affect day-to-day safety for in-scope systems, it likely sits outside this essential lane. Keeping the hygiene list tight protects schedules and reduces noise. Identity and access basics included in E1 focus on proving that only the right people can reach the right systems with the right privileges. You will show unique user accounts, role definitions tied to job duties, and multi-factor authentication for administrative access at a minimum. Periodic access reviews must occur and be evidenced with dated approvals for representative samples. Joiner, mover, and leaver steps should exist in procedure form and be visible in tickets or workflow logs. Password or authenticator standards should be documented and reflected in configuration where managed centrally. Privileged access must be constrained and monitored so elevated activity is not invisible. These basics answer the first buyer question: who can touch sensitive systems and how do you know? Endpoint, patching, and configuration controls included in E1 demonstrate that your computing surfaces are managed and kept in a known state. Show enrollment of in-scope devices in management tools, application of configuration baselines, and timely installation of security updates according to a defined schedule. Evidence should include screenshots or exports that identify systems, versions, and dates, not just policy documents. Administrative rights should be minimized, with processes for approved elevation when necessary. Vulnerability handling should tie scans to remediation with artifacts that connect findings to ticket closure. The purpose is to show that drift is contained and that exposure windows are not left to chance. These are the mechanics that convert intent into daily safety. Backup, recovery, and continuity included in E1 prove that data and services can return to operation after a disruption. Expect to show defined recovery objectives, proof of backup completion for in-scope systems, and at least one recent test restore with outcomes recorded. Immutability or separation of backup copies should be addressed for critical data to limit blast radius from ransomware or operator error. Access to restore functions must be controlled. Continuity expectations remain practical at this level. Documented steps, named owners, and a demonstration that the plan is not theoretical. Buyers care less about elegant prose and more about evidence that recoveries actually work. E1 keeps this focus tight and testable.
Logging and monitoring essentials included in E1 concentrate on getting the right data from the right places into a central view. Show that priority sources, identity providers, administrative consoles, endpoint protection, and critical applications feed events into a repository or service where alerts can be reviewed. Time must be synchronized so events correlate across systems, and retention should meet your investigative needs. Provide examples of reviewed alerts or dashboards with dates and owners to show that monitoring is not passive. Perfection is not required. Visibility is. The aim is to detect obvious misuse or configuration failures quickly enough to act. This baseline is the bridge between control design and operational reality. Secure development practices appear in E1 when software you build directly processes sensitive data in scope. The expectation is a lightweight set, defined code repositories with access controls, basic change review, and scanning for common vulnerabilities before release. Show that secrets are not stored in code and that dependency updates are tracked. Evidence might include pull request histories with approvals, pipeline logs, or scan reports with dates. E1 does not require an exhaustive secure development lifecycle, but it does expect proof that avoidable mistakes are not routinely shipped. This inclusion depends on applicability. If no custom code touches sensitive data, you will name that as a scoped exclusion. Third-party oversight minimums included in E1 recognize that vendors and platforms influence your risk. You will identify service providers that touch in-scope data or systems and document basic diligence, contracts, security summaries, or attestations that are current and relevant. Where a provider's control is relied upon, you will mark it as inherited and show how it applies to your tenant or account. Oversight at this level is pragmatic. Know who your providers are, what they promise, and what you still own. The goal is to prevent blind spots, not to run a full supplier audit program. Clear records and timelines satisfy most buyer expectations at the essential tier. Items typically excluded from E1 are those that require broad process depth or enterprise-wide measurement to prove convincingly. Examples include comprehensive risk management frameworks, expansive privacy program specifics, deep incident simulation programs, or organization-wide business continuity exercises. Tool capability tours without operational proof are also out of scope. E1 rewards outcomes over features. Highly specialized controls that apply only to narrow technologies are usually deferred unless they sit on the critical path for in-scope systems. Declaring exclusions up front prevents later detours and helps assessors stay inside the essential lane. Exclusion is not dismissal, it is sequencing. Advanced risk-based tailoring is excluded at E1 because it belongs to programs that test design choices across complex environments. At the essential level, tailoring decisions should be simple, well-explained, and tied to obvious factors, like whether a system processes sensitive data or is exposed to the internet. Elaborate weighting models, scenario matrices, and bespoke compensating controls often slow reviews and add little value for basic hygiene. Keep tailoring conservative. Include what is clearly relevant, exclude what is clearly not, and explain the middle in plain language. Save the intricate balancing acts for deeper assessments where they can be tested properly. Deep privacy program specifics are excluded in E1 because they require broader legal analysis, detailed data lifecycle design, and organization-wide training records to validate. At the essential level, you will still respect confidentiality through access, logging, and recovery safeguards. But formal privacy governance artifacts, such as comprehensive assessments, complex consent models, or advanced de-identification programs, are deferred. If a law or contract imposes specific privacy duties, you will acknowledge them and ensure E1 controls do not conflict. The intent is to avoid conflating basic technical hygiene with full-spectrum privacy management, which deserves its own lane and evidence. High-assurance sampling depth is excluded in E1 because the program favors quick, representative confirmation over broad coverage. You will sample enough to prove that a control operates, not enough to analyze estate-wide variance. Populations, timing windows, and selection methods still need to be documented, but sample sizes remain modest and targeted. If your environment demands heavy sampling to answer buyer questions, that is a sign to consider an implemented or risk-based level.
Keeping sampling lean at E1 maintains pace and avoids overpromising. The trade is intentional: faster assurance for essentials, broader proof reserved for higher tiers. Confirming inclusions with current guidance is the final guardrail that keeps your scope aligned. Before evidence work begins, review the latest official expectations for E1 and reconcile any differences with your draft plan. If guidance adds or clarifies a category, such as a new logging source or a tighter access practice, adjust scope and owners immediately. Record the date of the guidance you followed so reviewers know which version shaped your decisions. This small habit prevents surprises during quality checks and avoids rework after collection. Staying current is not a large burden at E1, but it is a necessary one. Scope clarity prevents rework, and E1 rewards teams that draw the line with purpose. Define the boundary, list the in-scope systems, and commit to the hygiene set that matters most. Include identity, endpoints, patching, logging, backups, and any applicable lightweight development and third-party steps. And exclude advanced constructs that belong to deeper programs. Write down tailoring in plain language and confirm against current guidance before you pull a single artifact. When you keep E1 compact and honest, assessments move quickly, buyers get the proof they need, and your team preserves energy for improvements. That is how essential assurance earns trust without slowing the mission.